Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA is keeping his memory alive by terrorizing a trans instructor who gave a failing grade to a student after she wrote a sermon in place of an assigned essay. And this tells us a lot about where we are as a society today. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. The instructor is now on administrative leave, and the governor of Oklahoma is even weighing in. Imagine writing an essay so terrible that the entire right-wing operation in this country goes to work to defend you from the consequences of your actions. That's precisely where Samantha Fulnecky, a junior at the University of Oklahoma, finds herself after being given an assignment to read and react to a research article by writing an essay. Before we get to the details of the assignment, it's important to clarify why exactly Turning Point USA is involved in all of this. And for those who don't know, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA is known for their professor watch list, a thing that still exists today, where they feature professors who teach things they do not like, including things like reality. And this list exists as a way to drive terror and abuse of these professors who step out of line of the Kirk ideology. The list makes it easier for you to begin a harassment campaign, which has happened to professors across the country who have received racist abuse and death threats as a result of being featured on this watch list. Naturally, keeping his legacy alive, Turning Point USA is continuing the tradition, and in this case, they have a student essay about the Bible to really get their supporters going and revved up to send those hateful screeds and death threats to a professor, or in this case, a graduate student instructor, who again gave a failing grade for a sermon/essay. The assignment in this psychology course was to read and thoughtfully respond to an article entitled, quote, "Relations Among Gender Typicality, Peer Relations, and Mental Health During Early Adolescence." And this is a research paper, a study that was published in a journal about a decade ago, and the introduction sets up the reason for conducting this study. As you'd expect, it tackles important issues like media coverage of teen suicide and how bullying impacts, how teasing and bullying both impact mental health. But the study specifically looks at the relationship between how being gender typical or atypical, that is falling in line with gender stereotypes or outside of gender stereotypes, can influence things like popularity, relationships with peers, and mental health. The researchers' findings here generally suggest that those who are more typical for gender expectations are rated as more popular by their peers, and that they also have more positive peer relationships than those who step outside of what is typical for gender expectations. Further, the research suggests that boys who do not fall into typical gender expectations are more likely to experience negative mental health outcomes, and that the social repercussions of not adhering to gender expectations could be driving these negative mental health outcomes, given those who step outside of what is expected are sometimes subjected to more teasing and rejection. And the paper is actually quite interesting in how it interrogates some of these findings in the discussion, looking at how the impact on boys may be more harsh when they step outside of gender norms than it is for girls, because some gender norms for girls are expanding. They note that girls have more freedom to be independent or athletic. All beneficial to know, all beneficial to discuss, all beneficial to interrogate. And it's an empirical article where the authors designed their study, collected data, analyzed that data, and got their study published. But Samantha Fulnecky decides to, I don't know, maybe not even read the research article, maybe read the title, and her thoughtful reaction to the article is to call trans people demonic and say that women love women things because God says. And when her instructor gave her 0 points and told her she did not follow the instructions, she reported the instructor for discrimination and solicited Turning Point USA's assistance in generating a harassment campaign. So is this a case of Samantha being discriminated against for her religious beliefs? Is the grade infringing on her freedom of speech? Let's read some of the essay together and see what you think. This is from junior in college, Samantha Fulnecky. Quote, "This article was very thought-provoking and caused me to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role it plays in our society. The article discussed peers using teasing as a way to enforce gender norms. I do not necessarily see this as a problem. God made male and female and made us differently from each other on purpose and for a purpose. God is very intentional with what he makes, and I believe trying to change that would only do more harm. Gender roles and tendencies should not be considered stereotypes. Women naturally want to do womanly things because God created us with those womanly desires in our hearts. The same goes for men. God created men in the image of his courage and strength, and he created women in the image of his beauty. He intentionally created women differently than men, and we should live our lives with that in mind." So, aside from the many grammatical errors, she begins by saying that the article was thought-provoking and caused her to thoroughly evaluate the idea of gender and the role that it plays in our society. While then not at all thoroughly explaining how the article caused her to thoroughly evaluate her ideas, she doesn't see teasing as a problem, bullying as a problem. The gender-based teasing that resulted in boys in this research article who display atypical gender norms experiencing greater depressive symptoms and more negative body image. The gender-based teasing that in this article prompts atypical gender-bending norm girls to have greater depressive symptoms. In a psychology class? Samantha. Samantha doesn't care about bullying and teasing. What are we doing here? She doesn't even cite specific claims from the research article and refute them, which would be in line with the assignment. And given this essay received 0 out of 25 points, let's just briefly look at what criteria is involved here. Samantha would have had to meet these different points in order to get her points. Number 1, does this paper show a clear tie-in to the assigned article? I mean, based on the first paragraph, no. You can't write a single sentence about how an article made you evaluate your positions and then proceed to provide 0 evidence of that claim. Number 2, does the paper present a thoughtful reaction or response to the article rather than a summary? I mean, it doesn't even appear to be responding to the article. You've heard all of the things I've picked out of the research article. There's so much more that I could have picked out to discuss here because it's actually a very interesting study with many different implications that you could discuss. But we don't see any of that. We don't see Samantha grappling with any of that. Number 3, is the paper clearly written? I would say it's barely clearly written at this point, especially for what you'd expect from her education level, but let's check out the next paragraph. Quote, "It is frustrating to me when I read articles like this and discussion posts from my classmates of so many people trying to conform to the same mundane opinion so they do not step on people's toes. I think that is a cowardly and insincere way to live. It is important to use the freedom of speech we have been given in this country, and I personally believe that eliminating gender in our society would be detrimental, as it pulls us farther from God's original plan for humans." So the research article is not written to conform to a mundane opinion. It's a study. It's a published research article. These are empirical findings based on data collected, analyzed, and published. And nowhere in this research article, by the way, will you find the word eliminate. So where are we getting this argument from about eliminating gender? And listen, I'm not going to read the rest of this paragraph because I only have so much time, but she goes into detail about the role of women in society as dictated by God. And again, there's no source, there's no elaboration. This is a point of contention among religious scholars. Religious scholars do not agree about what the Bible says, what the Bible prescribes. There are many different interpretations. She could certainly find a source for whatever it is that she wants to write here, but she didn't do that because the expectation here is that she can go on a hateful rant about gender and receive coddling that tells her that she's very special and very smart. But I thought that conservatives were anti-coddling of America's youth, you guys. I'm really confused. Let's check out the next paragraph. Quote, I do not think men and women are pressured to be more masculine or feminine. I strongly disagree with the idea from the article that encouraging acceptance of diverse gender expressions could improve students' confidence. Society pushing the lie that there are multiple genders and everyone should be whatever they want to be is demonic and severely harms American youth. I do not want kids to be teased or bullied in school. However, pushing the lie that everyone has their own truth and everyone can do whatever they want and be whoever they want is not biblical whatsoever. The Bible says that our lives are not our own, but that our lives and bodies belong to the Lord for His glory. I live my life based on this truth and firmly believe that there would be less gender issues and insecurities in children if they were raised knowing that they do not belong to themselves, but they belong to the Lord. And I have to say that there's actually an entire field of study in psychology dedicated to religious trauma and the negative impact of being raised in devout religious households where kids are taught that they are inherently bad, destined for hell unless they do X, Y, and Z. Therapists go to trainings on religious trauma so that they can more effectively treat clients who present to their offices with these issues. So simply proclaiming that you believe there would be fewer issues with gender and insecurities because you believe atypical gender expression is demonic is not what any reasonable person would call a thoughtful response. And someone might say, well, of course, you, Brittany, would never find any of this thoughtful. You just want her to write that she agrees with the article. No. Having graded college-level essays as a graduate teaching assistant myself, I can tell you that the way Samantha could have made this legitimate was to actually grapple with the implications of the research study here. She could cite sources that back up her claims. She doesn't even cite Bible verses. She doesn't even cite like Douglas Wilson, his book, Pete Hegseth's white nationalist pastor who wants to repeal the 19th Amendment, who I'm sure she agrees with a lot about. I've talked about that on this channel. She could cite research on the benefits of religious beliefs, for example. She did not do any of it. She stated her vibes, and we should expect more academic rigor from students. What is the point of college, in Samantha's view? Just endlessly submitting papers that say the Bible says and getting straight A's and then getting handed a diploma at the end of it? One thing that you hope people come out of college with is the ability to research. And that doesn't even mean research design specifics, how to design a study, collect and analyze data, how to avoid bias. It also means how to find information, how to find accurate information, how to assess quality research from biased research, how to find evidence for your beliefs. These skills are crucial for development, and they're more important now than ever in our disinformation hellscape filled with generative AI garbage and people who have no problem straight up lying in positions of power. And while Samantha's essay did not meet the academic standards and was insulting to entire groups of people, including her classmates, the instructor's response was very thoughtful. Quote, please note that I am not deducting points because you have certain beliefs, but instead I am deducting points for you posting a reaction paper that does not answer the questions for this assignment, contradicts itself, heavily uses personal ideology over empirical evidence in a scientific class, and is at times offensive. And I'm skipping a paragraph here, but I'm going to link the entire response for you to read if you'd like in the description. Quote, you argue that abiding by normative gender roles is beneficial. Parenthetically, it is perfectly fine to believe this. But to then go on and say that everyone should act the same, while also saying that people aren't pressured into gendered expectations is contradictory, especially since your arguments reflect a religious pressure to act in gender stereotypical ways. You can say that strict gender norms don't create gender stereotypes, but that isn't true by the definition of what a stereotype is. Please note that acknowledging gender stereotypes does not immediately denote a negative connotation, a nuance this article discusses. Now, I can imagine the situation happening on Facebook and someone gets this comment in response to whatever dumb thing they said, and they're just pissed, right? I mean, this was a mic drop response because everything the instructor said there is true. But Samantha likely didn't read this article. I mean, who really knows, given her incomplete and off-the-rails essay? But this response is actually what you should expect in college. If you want to make an argument, great, make the argument. Back it up with something other than your vibes. The expectation is that you will be challenged in the classroom. Your logical fallacies highlighted, your contradictions questioned, forcing you to grapple with the discomfort that comes with reevaluating what you believe and why you believe it, and forcing you to dig deeper. Instead, because it's 2025 and conservatives only pretended that they hated participation trophies, they only pretended to be against the coddling of America's youth. When you get a bad grade, you run to the internet and you cry discrimination, just as Samantha did in this case. And because we're in the era of those with the most power being the first to cave to this administration, would you be surprised to learn that the University of Oklahoma put the instructor on leave? Quote, "The University of Oklahoma takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, certainly including religious freedoms. Upon receiving notice from the student on the grading of an assignment, the university immediately began a full review of the situation and has acted swiftly to address the matter. The student reported filing a claim of illegal discrimination based on religious beliefs to the appropriate university office. OU has a clear process for reviewing such claims, and it has been activated. The graduate student instructor has been placed on administrative leave pending the finalization of this process. To ensure fairness in the process, a full-time professor is serving as the course instructor for the remainder of the semester." And so the coddling is in full swing. A student challenged to be more thoughtful, to think more critically, more logically, and the student complained and the instructor was removed. These are the same people who say there is equal opportunity for everyone, that if you don't want to be poor, you should just work harder, that you can't have everything you want. And yet, the moment they encounter difficulty, they call in the dogs until whatever they see as a barrier to their personal thriving has been removed, or in this case, harassed and removed. And this is dangerous because it isn't just the terrible writing or the lack of critical thinking or the fundamental disinterest in anything new or challenging or the total absence of curiosity. This is about further harming marginalized groups. And you have to wonder, when Samantha's mother is a political activist, an attorney who celebrated her January 6th clients being released from DC jail, if this wasn't all a setup from the beginning. Conservatives tell us that the left wants to shut down debate, that they run from challenging conversations, that they want to police language. But that's not what we see here at all. We see academic standards and an expectation that you rise to the occasion and handle your business. And instead of rising, Samantha chose the path of harassment in targeting a trans instructor. I hope you see this for what it is: more capitulation from institutions that should know better, and a right wing that is eager to provide the support for their adherents they eagerly deny for the rest of us. I'd love to hear from you on this. Please share your thoughts in the comments below or call and leave me a fewer than 3-minute voicemail at 202-656-1509 or send an email to info@thepageperspective.com. You can also support this work, and I would love it if you did, by becoming a channel member for as little as $1.99 a month. You can do that by clicking join below, or go to patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast. Please follow me on social media at Brittany Page, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Take care. I'll see you next time.